as a building part. We classify it as a research laboratory where we build apartments and where we test things.
So we're in the basement at the moment.
Right.
And I'm sure everyone can see we've got some equipment here. You're testing different things within the environment. And then above us, there are these 4 apartments for students.
Exactly.
Okay, great.
And thing is that these 4 apartments, they're real research laboratories. So almost each pipe, each square meter, it is someone research project.
Hello, Elena. Welcome to our little podcast.
Thank you for inviting me. It's always exciting to be in connection with you.
Oh, thank you. And again, I think we're getting an exciting conversation today because we're in the Live-In Lab. So, yeah, I think that's probably a good place to start, really, because what I want to achieve today is, just to get to pick your brains, really, some of the knowledge I know that you've acquired, and also understand, in academia, your relationship with the construction and smart building industry as well. So I think Live-In Lab's a good place to start. Tell us about what you do here.
Yeah, of course. Welcome to KTH Live-In Lab.
Thank you.
And to start talking about Live-In Lab, it's important to mention that there are 2 types of Live-In Lab as a definition. One is methodology, Live-In Lab as an approach to innovate around real estate, clean tech, with multiple stakeholders. So in many papers, in many academical studies, you will find that Live-In Lab might not even have a building, but they still call Live-In Lab because they create new type of innovation. I can a bit elaborate on it later. Second type is Live-In Lab as an environment. It is a real physical testbed. Normally it is a building or some kind of space where you can bring innovation close to the market. We call it real life contexts. And you can test products and services with the use of end users, with the use of real life context, business context, regulations, and so on. So right now we are in one of the most famous in Sweden. Of course, we have many, but it is one of the most active Live-In Lab related to construction industry, where we have physical buildings, several. Right now we are in the building built by Einar Mattsson, and it is a student house, with students' apartments. And 4 apartments specifically, they are designed as a Live-In laboratory where we have no permits, so we not classified where we build apartments and where we test things.
So we're in the basement at the moment.
Right.
And I'm sure everyone can see we've got some equipment here. You're testing different things within the environment. And then above us, there are these 4 apartments for students.
Exactly.
Okay, great.
And thing is that these 4 apartments, they're real research laboratories. So almost each pipe, each square meter, it is someone research project, and portfolio is pretty diverse from ethical nudging to advanced heat pump system powered by PV panels. And once we get some interesting insights or knowledge from these 4 apartments, then we can scale up and test it within 300 other apartments in this building. So that's kind of where the model is about, not statistical data, but test something what is new, what is not tested in the market before. See how does it work, and if this something works well, so then we can scale it up.
So you showed us something earlier, the flow rate meter that clips onto the thing. So that's a pretty good example, right? I guess is that something that's come from the guys that put that together? They've come from academia. They've then approached you at some point to get involved, and they wanted to test it in this environment.
So I can start from the point that we have very different stakeholders, from small startups, from students to big corporates. Everyone is welcome if you have a clear idea what you would like to innovate around. And I think 3 years ago, we got 2 students. They were master students from industrial product design, and they wanted to design a smart water meter, which might be just ultrasonic, very light, very cheap, and everyone can get it. And they just developed a prototype within their course, and then has become a master thesis project. Then we found that, wow, this is actually interesting. They got some investment, and they started to work on the development of the device. For you to know, we have 2 or 3 other companies having their water meters. So what help us to compare the quality of data, to compare the technology itself, and that's what creates this ecosystem of different partners, and the spirit of a bit of competition, and who is doing how and what and why. And that's why each Living Lab is kind of aiming to have diverse portfolio of stakeholders. For example, this smart ultrasonic water meters from startup, it's called Laptrino. They constantly check their data with Schneider electric water system. And sometimes Schneider data works better, sometimes their sensor works better. And that's what creates this collaboration between them. They kind of, it sounds like a bit competition, but still they are aiming to be partners. And that's where, like, from this primitive, like, B2B mindset, we try to come to what's called network constellations, where very different partners can come here. There is no, like, market pressure. You are not under pressure to create a perfect product. You're here to develop something. And it's totally fine if something doesn't work. So it's a spirit of garage, if you want. So you're here to test, to improve, to iterate, to team up, because there are a lot of smart people working there. And then you can just end up with some kind of final product or service with which you can go to the market.
Right, and learn, develop your product, exactly. And then
develop and test.
And then eventually commercialize it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Great. And you specifically, like, what's your involvement with KTH and the Living Lab?
So the story started a long time ago, where I decided that I would like to work with the building industry, specifically with the...
Good choice.
Yeah, I love it. Specifically, I wanted first to work with big data. That was my initial kind of interest. How we can kind of use data in the building to make everyday life better. But when I started, I didn't focus, will I work with just industrial data or end users data. I just wanted to explore which data do we have and what could we do with it. I call it data efficiency improvement, because most of us know that we generate a lot of data. We barely use 10% of it. According to IBM research, in the build industry, they said we use mostly like around 10% of data we do generate. And my first task was to create this develop analysis of which data do we generate in, for example, such lab, which quality of data do we have, and what could we do with this data. And on my second year, I some kind of step into thinking about data, digital services, and how we can fuel them with data. I was inspired mostly by companies like Google and Amazon, that their business commodity is data, not products or infrastructures. And that's where, like, I started to, actually, end users are the biggest sensor in the building. They massively generate data, occupancy data, activities data, behavioral data, energy consumption. That's where it's clicked with my department. I'm from energy department and energy technology department. And that's where, like, that we actually can learn a lot about savings of resources if we understand people better. That's why my focus from purely data-driven shift to human-driven and behavioral-driven. And that's where, like, since third year of my PhD, I started to focus on digital service design in build environment. So that's what I'm doing, trying to see which data can we use to create some value for end users. And I can give you an example. Right now I have this device. It's an Aura Ring. It's just market product. You can easily buy it. So that's a wearable device which can pretty precisely gather data about your biometrics and your physical feelings, heart rate, skin temperature, activity rate, and so on. And for example, this is the data which explain how do person feel right now. And then we have a lot of data from sensors. And now we're building machine learning algorithm which can combine data from this ring and data from built environment and identify some kind of anomalies where, like, I didn't sleep well. Is it something like physical or psychological, or it is built environment? And we try to see, can we contribute to my sleeping or my activities by manipulating data from built environment? So that's kind of a good example to show that data from human side talk with data from building side and generate value for well-being. Of course, it might be a question how to commercialize it. In the future, we see more well-being services because, especially with the COVID situation, people would like to understand that they are in the safe place, they feel good, they have less stress, and so on. We will have more technology where data from user side will communicate with data from building side. But besides business kind of question, it might also come ethical question. How much you want different companies know about such sensitive data like your health. And that's where I do my research in academia in Sweden, where we have a pretty strong standard about ethical improvements and so on. So my research project, I think we spent almost half a year developing ethical kind of report for this project and explaining everything what is needed.
Okay, so to put it in a bit of context, so so for example, the students that live in those flats, you're collecting sort of information about them and their behavior, and also the environmental aspect and the temperature, and then you can look for trends with the two. So as you said, like maybe they're not sleeping well that night, and then you can go and look at the data and perhaps understand if that was an environmental issue.
Yeah, exactly. Environmental is one thing, but it's more like about how to create this human building interaction with a common value for both, for environmental building operation and for end users' well-being kind of improvement. Especially talking about students' apartments and students, they're here to study. We need to know that they're productive, nothing disturb them, and they can focus on the process of studying. Especially, it was interesting to research data during the exam time. That's the mostly extreme data.
Yeah,
no
like
sleep,
really
no
stressful.
activity.
Okay, right, yeah.
And a lot of anxiety. And that's where like, wow, they are too busy to maybe control built environment parameters. Maybe we can help them bring a bit more fresh air during these days, or play a bit with lighting, because that could help them to be more productive. I was also inspired a lot by Harvard Healthy Building School, Joseph Allen, professor, who focus on exactly this, how our buildings can kind of support us in our daily activities, and not have this general idea how you behave, but no, make it more personalized and make it more like adaptive. And even if you talk, a lot of criticism come into this personalization in the buildings, because people tell, oh, come on, but we might be 4 people in family and we all have different thermal comfort kind of habits. But let's take music. If you want to listen different music, you just put headphones, right? And listen different music. So it means that we could develop systems, technology, which can address your needs and address technology to fulfill your needs. And if you need to maybe do your writing, you need zero kind of noise. It's your need. And if your, son or wife want to play drums, maybe they need something else, right? And that's kind of where understanding better what might be your needs, how building can fulfill it. That's what I'm trying to do in this research. And of course, it's a very new field. And I think it's just beginning of the story about human building interaction and developing all these products and services. It's just something what's happening.
I totally agree. I mean, I think we've seen in the work that I've done researching the markets, like we've seen so much more interest in user experience and human building interaction recently. And we're just about to, I think in the summer, publish a report on tenant experience applications and workplace experience applications. So I think a lot of companies are looking at an opportunity there to commercialize this, basically what you've been talking about, right? Like being able to, I guess in a way, just for the building to connect better to the user. And, previously we've talked about issues around that, right? Like about how the construction and building industry has been too separated from the end user. And that creates issues, I think.
Right, especially with what mostly you're doing. You're focusing on this kind of commercial buildings, which of course creates specific kind of uncertainty in the planning. For example, sometimes building owners, they do not know who will be their end users. It might be office, it might be real estate. Not real estate, retail. So it means that sometimes it's not easy to plan in detail your space. At the same time, still there is end user, And even if you do B2B business, even if you do just office space development, there are people in the end who are coming to this office, experience all the kind of end results of your development. And if they are not happy, if they don't feel safe, they would just not come to this property. They would complain about it. And that's where like this B2B2C thinking is something what I believe should be more developed. And so I think it's especially with COVID, where just companies can easily just stop contracts in all these commercial buildings and might create new demand for like safety and like well-being. So it's becoming really important.
And what's next for you after this phase of research?
That's an interesting question, because I'm exactly now in the transition mode, because I'm finishing my PhD end of this year. And last 5 years, I mostly worked with residential buildings from many, many sides, from sensors, network development to policy making mechanisms. And I found that I need more space for innovation, even being like in this advanced lab. I still see a lot of things I would like to do faster. And that's why I decided to go more to countryside property development. Why? Because there are less regulations. 2, it is smaller space, what means it's automatically easier to innovate around it, because, again, less standards, less regulations, less responsibility, because if it's one single house, it's not 300 apartments. We need to plan in advance how all these lives will happen. So, and I see a lot of potential for a topic like well-being. That's how do you feel in different spaces? Do you feel safe in the city or countryside? Because we sometimes focus too much on the building, and we forget that built environment, it's also all spaces around. It is also like, grocery stores around. It's public spaces, it's parks. Yep. And that's where like I want to connect and start develop built environment around lifestyle rather than specific functionality of the building. For example, I think one of my favorite reports was written by Fjord called Living Services, where they just try to focus how do you live your 1 week. And then they try to map all the spaces you interact with within 1 week. And that's include, of course, your apartment or your house. It's include retail. It's include entertainment spaces. It include parks. It include gym and many spaces. And that's where it's interesting that city is already pretty complex to explore it. That's why if you go to countryside, there's less spaces, there are less kind of smaller ecosystem, but still it's very diverse. So you can do your barbecue outside. Is it building or not? That's kind of where the boundary kind of question might be interesting to research. So in my future, I will probably focus more on neighborhood design, community design, like social architecture, from the point of human networks, and building spaces around this kind of community needs.
Okay. So, I mean, again, something we've previously talked about, like this marriage of work and home, right? Where we've perhaps previously thought about that as two distinct things, like work, something you do here, and then you go to your home to escape that because maybe you don't like your job or maybe you do, but actually you can see an opportunity there to bring these two things closer together. Or
yeah, I think that it's very much depending on questions like what is your job and what do you need for your job. That's I think where we need to start. What do you really need to perform well within your tasks? Some people really need, like, I don't know, a space where they can focus, like coders. Some people need social spaces. And depending on different kind of working needs, you might redesign the way you work. For example, if you're really dedicated to your work process, I don't think you need to really divide like working space and living space. Why? Because I said it to you before, I was inspired by Venetian artists and sculpture people. They had this mestre, this type of space where you combine your living space and studio. Why? Because if you get an insight or idea, you need to very fast come to your studio and maybe paint something or sketch something. What means that if your work is something what you really do with passion and you don't need to have like clear hours. You just feel for working, I don't know, doing something. And that's kind of where you can just have easy access to the space. Also, I think it's very important to understand that, of course, you need to have some zones, but still kind of, I believe that what we need to understand what we feel good from. And if you feel really just good in the office and social, you need to have some access to it. But latest research from McKinsey showed that 37% of people, they are okay to have only 1-2 days in the office. The rest, they want to stay at home. And that's why people invest now a lot in redesigning their homes. And that's where home is going to change, because now your home is your office, is your studio, is your hobby spot, is your workshop station, is your living room, is your bedroom, is your kitchen. Home is becoming this Swiss Army knife, many things. And
the last year is just going to accelerate.
Yeah, exactly.
That transition, isn't it? Yeah.
Plus, when you combine generations in one home, I mean, some kids are gamers, some kids are musicians, and there's so many interests which we need to kind of support with the flexible infrastructure, which is this infrastructure which kind of help you to feel that, oh, wow, I can do what I like to do without any obstacles.
So can you see, there's a lot of talk in research about urbanization, right? Okay, and of course I think a lot of that's coming from developing economies. But in Sweden, can you see sort of more opportunities for people to move out to the countryside, not perhaps get a better quality of life or be able to do more things not in urban areas? Yeah,
that's what I plan to call my next research lab, de-urbanization lab, because it's just kind of movement where you feel that city doesn't give you enough to just be in a smaller space, in the space with limitations. And that's why I see the movement, especially people who are doing code or can work remotely easily. They want to have a view on the lake. They want to have a space to do kind of, yoga outside. And it's creating this demand of going to countryside, developing infrastructure. And I think you gave before a good example of Norway, where they use taxation mechanism of incentivizing people living in the rural areas and develop them. And I believe that in the future we will have a lot of these small villages by different companies or cluster of companies creating this nice neighborhoods. And for example, one of my favorites kind of a project about this new society neighborhood development. Nearby Venice, there is a place called H Farm. It's a startup village where you can also live, and they also open the campus for innovative programs. And it's kind of becoming this really hub of creative, young, ambitious people living on the countryside, seeing how farming happening. They see how the corn is growing, and it's also give you this, oh, my idea also need to grow, need to be a bit patient, and so on. And I think that rural areas, they're full of lessons, full of capacity for well-being. Also, there are so many things you can't do in the city, which you can do there. Different hobbies, workstations, pot making, all these, crafty things. I think director of our living lab, Jonas Vogel, he's really adore working with wood. And he needs his workshop to just after work, after all these techie things, work with some wood. Or another example of this type of person is a good friend of mine, Felipe, CTO of Nestle. I asked him, how do you always work with this tech data? How do you balance? And he said, I have my garage and I fix old Japanese motorcycles. That's a place where I can just do something with my hands and feel its connection to physical world.
What about more the social interaction that in urban areas, it's so easy, right, to interact with other people, right, to have that social experiences, whatever they might be. If you have kids, to have group for where you can meet other parents, or go to a bar, go to a restaurant. I mean, these are experiences that are more difficult in rural areas. But have you thought about that? How can you develop those sort of things?
For sure. That was one of the main kind of question we got in the beginning of the press study. To start with, research in urban areas, people feel way more lonely. in the cities. Even if you're in the city, it doesn't mean that you're super social. You still use social media and digital platforms to communicate with people. You might sit in the cafe, have a nice coffee, and be in kind of Facebook.
Right, and not talk to anyone.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
So that's also indicating that it's partly true that we are very social in the cities and we are not social on the rural areas. I had experiment. I lived like 2 months on the countryside, and every neighbor said me hello every time they met me. What means that when you feel this little isolation, you start to communicate. It's organic reaction. So it means that's why I want to focus on neighborhood designs and more like social architecture, network of people and infrastructure for them. Because if you just you don't need many people. You don't need thousands of people around you. You need kind of small group of people with whom you are happy to interact.
Yeah, because there's actually research, right, about how many faces and people we can recognize, right? There is a limit, isn't there? Like
150, as I remember correct.
Yeah.
It's number of people you can keep in your head as a different, of course, distance, but it's kind of number of people which your brain can remember and can kind of.
I think for me, it's like 10.
No, 10 is the inner circle, let's call it. But then it could be some other colleagues.
It's got a really bad memory.
So that is.
Yeah. Another question I wanted to ask, with your experience in academia, but you also interact with companies, especially here at Live and Lab, right? How do you see that relationship, right, between academia and industry, commercial industry, and how does academia help the industry?
Yeah, that's a very good question because it's a constant roller coaster from very strong belief in public-private partnership to a lot of kind of misunderstanding because historically, of course, academia, especially if we talk about Swedish academia, we are a governmental organization and we have a pretty high level of trust because we are funded by let's call it tax money of citizens, and that's what make us prioritize serving their needs and being mostly oriented on societal level of thinking. And of course, we understand that business is playing a crucial role in any type of development. That's why we believe in cooperation, and we see that we would like to cooperate to solve societal problems. But sometimes it is a misunderstanding that academia, especially Swedish, we are not trying to specifically serve to business needs. It might be research about business model innovation, where we try to innovate about how to make money. But most of researchers and scientists here, they have a pretty clear statement that we want to do as objective as possible study. And the study might not perfectly support specific company. It might be that after research we found something what actually work against company. And that's why sometimes companies are not ready to be open about some kind of sites like this. But what I see with Live and Lab, that it is a more and more interest to cooperate and learn and improve together. Because what we have methods and tools which are scientific and research-based, and we have a strong intention to do objective study. What help to companies who prioritize long-term development. If you want to serve to society, if you want to be better and better, not only sell faster and faster, then normally we have no problems. We set the goals, we go to them together, and we share responsibilities. But sometimes, of course, we have companies which try to just use a brand of academia, and then they're just not ready to be patient. And sometimes, especially, that was my first kind of understanding that academia, of course, it's way slower. And sometimes time perception within company and academia, they're different.
I remember, move at different pace.
An example was that one company said, okay, what are you meaning 3? Is it 3 what? I said, years. And they're like, what, years? 3 years research? No, 3 months. That's how the pace we have. And I said, but we just can't be sure that we can have a quality outcomes of this. But there is one but. Why I love to work with business. Sometimes we are too slow. I need to agree on it. Sometimes we can speed up because, for example, let's take corona situation and vaccine development. You have no time. You need to be faster. And that was a very strong business push and situation push. You can't do 5-year study on vaccine development. You need to test, you need to find faster track for your research. And that's what I learn a lot from companies. That's why I love to cooperate with businesses, because they create a pressure for time for me. They said, Elena, we don't have 2 years, we have half year. Can we balance and compromise maybe with some sides of study but just get results as good as possible, but for 6 months? And then we start to discuss, okay, what can we neglect and why, and explain it. And that's where a business, I think, creates a pretty good pressure for time. At the same time, we always create pressure for quality of outcomes.
It's an interesting point. I think it's like a two-way street, isn't it?
Exactly.
I think academia can learn from the commercial aspect and academia, and the other way as well. Yeah, no. Do you have any advice for companies that how they can interact with academia? Maybe they're developing a product, they want to, something like this, use Live in Lab to test it, or maybe they're interested in researching, they have an R&D budget and maybe they want to...
I don't like to give advices because I think it's just everyone has a right to behave and decide how they want, but let's call it advice, which I always give to my students: just stay curious about any ways to do things. And sometimes when you're doing business, just open your mindset and just ask, how do academia does things? How do labs do things? And this kind of openness for different formats, it's a first step to diversify your portfolio of methods. How can you? And then you can really find, that's something in this. And of course, talking about KTH Live in Lab, we are always welcome companies to contact us, to come, to ask questions. So we're always open to book meetings and discuss different problems. But what we sometimes see, that's a feedback. You need to do homework. You need to decide what problem do you want to work with. Because sometimes we experience companies think that we're kind of consultancy style organization. We are not. We are a research hub. And we're not here to do work for you. We would like to see companies which understand that, there is something what we kind of would like to work on. Let's talk about it. We would not come with ideas to them because, of course, we have a lot of ideas, but we would like they also have visions, ideas, problems which they would like to cooperate about.
And given your experience with commercial side of the business, academia, and everything in between, are there certain things you would like to see from the building, construction, technology, development? Yeah, I know. That's sort of the podcast in itself, probably, isn't it?
I think something pop up, especially being inspired by your latest, one of the latest reports about startups, prop tech, and small medium enterprise. It is happening a huge wave of active small companies with ambitions to come and fix problems fast, creatively, effectively. And I just published the paper. I used a lot your report about small, medium enterprises in European Union. And it is a huge movement of prop tech startups working with real estate. And I think companies should look at the side of these small active hubs, companies who are trying to kind of solve problems differently. And not just about they want a big company buy them. No, they just really want to solve a problem. And that's where this kind of hungry mind for solving problems, solving challenges, it's really happening. And I think in your report you have around 200 startups you analyze. It's crazy, and all of them make sense.
No, that's brilliant advice. I think too often it's sort of the focus perhaps is on the exit, which of course, it's a commercial organization, totally understand that, but and let's face it, in construction and real estate, there's a lot of problems. So there's a lot of places to start with that problem and try and solve it. Yeah.
And their energy is great.
Yeah,
their passion
I agree.
is very it's high. So
great. I think that's a good place to finish today.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you as well. That's brilliant. If people want to find out more about Live in Lab or your research, is there somewhere they can...
Yeah, there's a website. You can Google KTH Live in Lab. It's Swedish and English website. There are news, there are project description. They can easily find my contacts there. So just be curious.
Great.
Stay hungry for knowledge.
Stay curious. Absolutely. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.